Hello, so this is lesson 11B, rational number operations, day 1. Students will be able to find the sum or difference of rational numbers. Students will be able to discuss whether your estimates make sense. And this is important for many real-world problems like finding a rational distance between two objects. So rational numbers are numbers that are written in the form of a fraction. So basically, it's every number you've ever seen so far. You really won't see irrational numbers until 8th grade. So rational numbers are just every type of number ever that you've seen. So let's look at a number line and let's look at some of these rational numbers and where they would lie on the number line. So in number line school, there is one straight hallway. The numbers on the classrooms indicate the distance from the main office, which is 0. Mark the location of the following classrooms on the map of Numberline School below. All right, so we have Mr. Brown is in room -3 1/4. -3 1/4. So if this is the main office, -3 1/4 would be -1, 2, 3. And 1/4 of that, well, let's think, half would be right there. So 1/4 is half of a half. And so that means Mr. Bowen, I called him Mr. Brown. Mr. Bowen's room, -3 1/4, would be right there. -3 1/4. Right there, just to the left of the office. Let me zoom in so you can see that just a little bit better. There we are. All right, how about Miss England? Miss England is at -6 1/4. So let's count from 0. We go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 1/4 is a little bit more. So there's half and 1/4 would be right there. So we have -6 1/4 way over there to the left. Mr. Franks is even farther away at -8 1/3. So from the office, we'd go left 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 1/3 more than that is a little less than half. It's at 1/3 right there. So there would be -8 1/3. All right, and that's Mr. Franks. Miss Abe is at 3.5, and that's positive. So 3.5, remember, that means we're going to go 1, 2, 3, and then 0.5 from there is the halfway mark. So positive 3.5 is going to be right there between 3 and 4. All right, on to Mrs. Chidester. Mrs. Chidester's at 5.25. So let's go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 0.25 from there is the same as 1/4. So they would be just a little past the 5. Positive 5.25 is right there. And then finally, Mr. David is at -5.2, -5.2. So from the office, we turn left and go -1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and -5.2 is just beyond that. All right, so there's all of our numbers. Now let's see what it asks about all these people. So we have let's see, we've got Mr. Frank's room, we have Miss England's room, Mr. David's room. Right here, -3 1/4 was Mr. Bowen. We have 3.5 Mrs. Chidester. No, Miss Abe is right here. And finally, Miss Chidester out here. So it says, whose classroom is further from the main office? Miss Abe or Mrs. Chidester. Estimate, then find the actual distance. So Miss Abe is a little more than 3 units away. A little more than 3 units away. So Miss Abe is about 3 units away. And Mrs. Chidester, let's just write Chidester, is about 5 units away. All right, so which one is farther from the main office? Well, obviously that would be Mrs. Chidester, and she's exactly 5.25 units away from the main office. So she's farther away. How about Joe? Joe has Mr. Bowen's class first hour, which means first period, and Miss England's class second hour. How far must he walk to get from Mr. Bowen's class to Miss England's class? So Mr. Bowen is over here at -3 1/4. That's Mr. Bowen's class. And Miss England's class is at -6 1/4. All right, so from -3 1/4 to -6 1/4. Let's see what that distance is going to be. So I have to move to the left, so let's see. That's -3 1/4, negative 4 1/4, negative 5 1/4, negative 6 1/4. So it looks like I'm going to have to move 3 units to the left. So what does it say? How far must he walk? So let's say he must go. So Joe must go 3 units left. And we can tell that using the number line from negative 3 1/4 to negative 6 1/4 was 3 units. What is the distance between Mrs. Chidster's class and Mr. David's class? All right, Mrs. Chidster was right here at 5.25, and Mr. David's class is way over here at negative 5.2. So we're looking at the distance between these two. So let's count back. That's 5.25, 4.25, 3.25, 2.25, 1.25, 0.25, negative 0.25, negative 1.25, negative 2.25, negative 3.25, negative 4.25, negative 5.25. So all together that was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 units. 10 units to get all the way back to negative 5.2. All right, so from Mrs. Chidster's class to Mr. David's class, it was about 10 units. So that's a far distance between those two classes. All right, so let's go ahead and move into the main part of today. Oh, by the way, would we be able to plot the location of these on this line? Well, it ends a little too soon for both of those. All right, but the main idea of today's lesson is way over here, so let's scoot to the side and let's look at these positive and negative decimals. So we've gone through a positive plus a negative plus a negative. So remember, we want to count. So do you have more positives or more negatives? More positive or more negative? And we're still using that same rule that we did last time with the integers. It's just that this time we have fractions and decimals. Now you'll see that I drew a very big line here on the side of 8, 9, 10, 11 because this is going to be our day 1 stuff today. Day 1 is on this side and day 2 is on the other side. Day 2 on the other side. So I'm going to write day 2. Day 2 is on that side. So tomorrow we'll be looking at fractions. Today we're just going to focus on decimals. So we're just going to focus on numbers 1 through 7 today, and then you're going to try just working with decimals. All right, so right here we have negative 12.7 plus negative 17.7. Remember, we need to ask ourselves, what do I have more of? More negatives or more positives? Well, do I even have any positives here? Well, no, because I have 12.7 negatives, 17.7 negatives. So I'm going to write in they're all negative. All negative. So when they're all negative, we add. All negative. So we're going to add those numbers up. And they will result in a bigger negative number. All right, remember our rule with decimals though. 12.7 plus 17.7. We've got to line those decimal points up just like money. 7 plus 7 would give us 14. Carry the 1. 7 and 2 is 9, plus 1 more is 10, carry the 1, 1 plus 1 plus 1 is 3, and we bring that decimal down, and so altogether we would have negative 30.4. So not much different than what we were doing before, but this just reminds you of our decimal rules. All right, how about this one? We have 15.7 positives, we have 9.22 negatives, so we do have something where they're different. They're not all negatives. We have both. We have both positive and negative, both. So we end up subtracting. So remember subtract. Remember in the last part of this unit, we would write out all the positives and all the negatives, and we would cancel out those pairs, those 0 pairs. Well, that's what's happening here too. It's just we have little decimal parts. So since we have both, we know that some are going to cancel out. And so we'll end up subtracting. But do I have more positive or more negative? Well, I have more positives. How many more? Well, that's where we have to subtract. 15.7 minus 9.22, lining up those decimals right there. and filling in a 0 right here. Now remember, we have to borrow. Don't forget about your borrowing. So we cannot take 2 from 0, so I have to borrow from the 7, make it a 6, and give that 10 right here. Now I have 10 minus 2, which gives me 8. 6 minus 2, which is 4. Bring down the decimal. And we can read this as 15, take away 9, which is going to be 6. All right, so we have a difference of 6.48. Did I have more positives or negatives here? Well, I had more positives, and so I would write positive 6.48. All right, let's try that again. That's really all we're doing today. All right, number 3, 3.3 plus negative 3.511. Are these the same or are they different? Do we have both or are they all the same? Let's see, we have positives and negatives. They are different, so we have to subtract these numbers. All right, and what do I have more of? Do I have more positives or negatives? Well, it's not much more, but I do have more negatives. So we can tell because I'm looking to the right of the decimal, right? If this were money, it'd be $3.30. If I took off this last one, it'd be $3.51, and $3.51 would be more. So I actually have more negatives. To find out how much more, we line them up and subtract. So 3.551 minus 3.3, fill in our zeros, and this I can subtract. 1 take away nothing is 1. 1 take away nothing is 1. 5 minus 3 is 2. Bring down the decimal, and 3 minus 3 is 0. So what we would have left is negative 0.211. There's our answer. All right, let's try again. 4.9 minus 14.6. Remember, all minuses add the opposite. So now I have positives and negatives, so I subtract. I would have more negatives, so that's the one I put up top. 14.6 minus 4.9. We have to borrow from the 4, make it a 3, give that group of 10 to the 6. 16 minus 9 is going to give us 7. Bring down the decimal, and 13 take away 4 is going to give us 9. And so in this case, we'd be left with negative 9.7. Number 5, there's a subtraction, so we add the opposite. All right, in this case, do I have more positives or more negatives? Well, I have more positives. That one goes up top, 22.6. And I'm going to have to take away the 7.81, filling in a 0. All right, I can't take 1 from 0, so I borrow from the 6 and make it a 5. Give it that 10 to the 0. So now it's 10 minus 1, which gives me 9. Sorry, that almost looked like a decimal point there. Here we go. 10 minus 1 is 9. I cannot take 8 away from 5, so I borrow from the 2 and make it a 1. Give that group a 10 to the 5, so now it's 15 minus 8, which is 7. Bring down the decimal, and I can't take 7 from 1. This one has a lot of borrowing. So I take 1 from here, give it right there. 11 minus 7 is 4, and then finally I bring down the 1. All right, so now, did I have more positive or negative? I had more positive, so the answer is 14.79. 2 more. All right, here we go. Minus. Minus a negative means add the opposite. So now do I have more negatives or more positives? I have more positives, so I'm going to write that one up top. 24.52 minus 2.9. Make sure to line up the decimal places and then fill in your 0. 2 take away 0 is still 2. I cannot take 9 from 5, so I borrow next door. Thank you very much. 15 minus 9 is going to give me 6. Bring down the decimal. 3 minus 2 is 1, and bring down the 2. Now, was that more positive or more negative? It was positive, so my answer is 21.62. Nice and positive. All right, last one. Negative 18 minus 16.8. Remember, that means add the opposite. And this time they are both negative. Both negative. They are all negative. All negative, so we add. All right, so I have 18 and 16.8. Remember, if this were $18, I would write it 18.00 plus 16.8, which gives me 14, carry the 1, and we negative 34.80.